If the person who destroyed you suddenly became your only shield, would you run? Or would you stay? The conference room felt too small, like the walls were inching closer with every accusation thrown across the table, voices sharp, overlapping, suffocating, and Noah Carter stood frozen at the center of it all, fingers curled tight around a folder he couldn't even feel anymore, his name echoing in tones that sounded like judgment, like blame, like the beginning of something that would end very badly. And he tried to speak, tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. They never did when it mattered. His throat locked, his chest tight, the air too thin, and then suddenly everything shifted, a presence cutting through the noise, a firm arm braced in front of him, not touching, but close enough to stop the world, and a voice, calm, controlled, dangerously steady, cut clean through the chaos. Back off. He's not responsible for this. And Noah's breath hitched because he knew that voice. He knew it before his brain could even catch up, before his eyes could lift, before his body could react. And when he finally looked up, it felt like stepping straight into a memory he had spent years trying to bury. Lucas Hayes stood there, inches away, taller than he remembered, sharper, colder, like time had carved him into something even more untouchable. And for a second Noah forgot where he was, forgot the room, the job, the present, because all he could see was high school hallways and whispered laughter, and that same face looking at him like he was nothing, like he was something to step over, and his stomach dropped so fast it made him dizzy. No, not him, anyone but him. And yet here he was, standing between Noah and the rest of the room like he had every right, like he belonged there, like he always had, the voices around them quieting, uncertain now, tension shifting, and Noah could feel it, that strange pull between past and present, between fear and something worse, something he didn't want to name, because none of this made sense. Not the way Lucas didn't even look at the others, not the way his focus stayed locked on Noah like nothing else existed, not the way his presence felt less like a threat and more like a barrier, like protection, and Noah hated that. Hated the confusion curling under his skin, hated the way his body didn't know whether to step back or stay still, because this was the same person who had ruined everything, the same person who had turned his world into something small and quiet and careful, and yet now he was the only one standing in front of him, holding the line, and when the room finally cleared, when the noise faded into uneasy silence, Lucas didn't move right away, didn't step back, didn't break that impossible distance between them, and Noah could feel his pulse in his throat, loud, unsteady, betraying him. And then Lucas leaned just slightly closer, close enough that his voice dropped into something softer, something that didn't belong to the past Noah remembered. And he said, almost like a question, almost like a challenge, "You still think I ruined you?" Noah's breath stuttered, sharp and uneven, because the question landed too close, too precise, like Lucas had reached straight into something Noah had spent years trying to bury. And for a second he could not answer, could not even look away, because Lucas was still there, still too close, still watching him like he was waiting for something real instead of the polite, controlled version Noah had learned to show the world. And that made something in his chest twist hard, uncomfortable, unfamiliar. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. He stepped back, fast enough that the distance felt like oxygen, like survival, and his voice came out tighter than he wanted, thinner. "Do not act like you get to ask me that." And Lucas did not flinch, did not look surprised, just straightened slightly like he had expected that reaction all along, like he had rehearsed it in his head 100 times, and that was worse. That was somehow worse than anything else, because it meant this was not accidental. This was not coincidence. This was deliberate. And Noah hated that thought more than anything. Hated the idea that Lucas Hayes had stepped back into his life on purpose, because that meant there was a reason, and Noah did not trust any reason that involved him. Not anymore. Not after everything. His fingers tightened around the folder again, knuckles pale, grounding himself in something physical, something real. "You do not get to play hero now," he added, quieter. This time, but sharper, like the words had edges he could finally hold on to. And for the first time, Lucas's expression shifted. Not much, just a flicker, something almost unreadable passing through his eyes before it disappeared again behind that same controlled calm. And Noah caught it. Of course he did. because he had spent years memorizing every small change in that face whether he wanted to or not. "I am not playing anything," Lucas said, low, steady, and there was no hesitation in it, no sarcasm, no bite, just something that sounded dangerously close to honesty, and Noah did not know what to do with that, did not know where to put it, because it did not match the version of Lucas he had carried with him for so long. The version that laughed without looking back, the version that made everything feel small, insignificant, and now here he was, standing in a quiet office with city noise humming faintly through the glass windows, saying things that did not fit, doing things that made even less sense, and Noah's mind raced to catch up, to make it logical, to turn it into something he could reject cleanly, but nothing lined up, nothing clicked into place, and the silence between them stretched, thin and tight, until Noah broke it again, because he had to, because if he did not, he might start asking questions he was not ready to hear the answers to. "Then why?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Softer now, almost uncertain, and he hated that too. Hated the way his voice betrayed him. "Why are you doing this?" And Lucas's gaze did not waver, did not soften. But there was something in it now, something heavier, something that felt like it had been there for a long time, waiting, and when he spoke, it was quieter, almost careful, because no one else will. And that should have been simple, that should have been easy to dismiss. But it was not. It settled somewhere deep, uncomfortable, because no one knew what it felt like when no one stepped in, when no one said anything, when no one chose you. And for a second, just a second, his anger faltered, his certainty cracked, and he hated that more than anything. Hated the way his chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from something dangerously close to understanding. And he shook his head quickly, like he could force the feeling out, like he could reset everything back to something safe, something clear. "I do not need you," he said, even though the words felt less solid than before, and Lucas watched him for a long moment, unreadable again, before he finally stepped back, giving Noah space, real space this time. But the distance did not feel the same, did not feel like relief, because now there was something left behind. In it, something unresolved, something that refused to settle, and as Lucas turned slightly toward the door, he added, almost under his breath but not enough to miss, "You did not before." A pause, just long enough to matter. "But you might now." And Noah stood there, heart still uneven, mind still spinning, because for the first time since walking into that room, he was not just thinking about the past, he was thinking about what came next, and that was somehow even more dangerous. Noah did not move right away after Lucas left, the silence in the room pressing in around him like something unfinished, something waiting, and he hated how the words lingered, how they refused to settle into something he could neatly reject, because that would have been easier, cleaner, safer, but nothing about this felt safe anymore. Not the way Lucas had looked at him, not the way his voice had softened just slightly at the edges, not the way it all felt too intentional to be coincidence. And Noah exhaled slowly, forcing his shoulders to relax, forcing himself back into the version of control he had built over the years, the version that did not react, that did not spiral, that did not care, because caring had cost him too much before, and he was not going back there, not for anyone, especially not for Lucas Hayes. But the problem was that Lucas was everywhere now, not physically, not always in the same room, but close enough, present enough, that Noah could feel it, that subtle shift in the air whenever he walked into a space, the quiet awareness that Lucas was watching, not in a way that felt invasive, but in a way that felt deliberate, measured, like he was always calculating something Noah could not see. And that made it worse, because it meant this was not impulsive, not random. This was a choice, and Noah did not understand why he was the one being chosen. Not then, not now, not ever. And the next morning proved it was not going to stop, because the moment Noah stepped into the office, coffee still warm in his hand, trying to focus on anything that was not Lucas, his manager's assistant intercepted him with a tight smile and a stack of files. "You have been reassigned to the Hayes account," she said, casual, like it was nothing, like it was not. The kind of sentence that made Noah's stomach drop instantly, and he stared at her for a second too long, processing, recalculating, trying to find a way out of it before it fully settled. "I think there has been a mistake," he said, carefully, but she shook her head without hesitation. direct order. And that was it. No room to argue. No space to refuse. Just a clear, unavoidable line drawn straight back to Lucas. And Noah's grip tightened slightly around the coffee cup, heat seeping into his palm, grounding him just enough to keep his reaction contained. Because of course it was a direct order. Of course Lucas had done this. And the realization hit sharp and immediate. Not anger exactly, but something close, something tangled with disbelief, and something else he refused to name. And he turned, slower this time, more controlled, walking toward Lucas's office with each step feeling heavier than it should, like he was walking back into something unfinished instead of forward into something new. And when he reached the door, it was already slightly open, like Lucas had expected him. Like this was all part of the same plan Noah could not quite see yet. And that thought sent a quiet tension down his spine, because plans meant intention, and intention meant this was not over, not even close. And when he pushed the door open fully, Lucas was already there, standing near the window, sunlight catching along the sharp lines of his profile, composed, calm, like nothing had changed, like everything had. And his eyes shifted the moment Noah stepped in, locking onto him with that same steady focus that made Noah feel like he was being seen too clearly, too completely. And for a moment neither of them spoke, the silence stretching just enough to carry everything unsaid between them. Until Noah broke it, because he had to, because he refused to stand there and let Lucas control the pace of this. "You reassigned me," he said, voice even, controlled, but not soft, never soft, and Lucas did not deny it, did not look away, just gave a small nod like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Yes," he said, simple, direct, and Noah let out a short breath, something between disbelief and frustration, because of course it was that easy for him. Of course Lucas could just change things, move pieces, shift Noah's life without asking. And something in Noah tightened at that. Something old, something familiar, and he stepped further into the room, closing the distance just enough to make his next words land. "You do not get to decide where I go." And Lucas's expression did not change, but there was something there again, that same flicker, that same almost unreadable shift that made Noah's chest tighten before he could stop it. "I am not deciding where you go," Lucas replied, quieter now, but no less certain. "I am making sure you are not pushed out." And that stopped Noah for a second, just long enough to matter, because that was not what he expected, not what he was prepared for, and the silence that followed felt heavier than before, filled with something neither of them had said yet, something that lingered just beneath the surface, waiting for the moment it would finally break through. And Noah realized, with a slow, unwelcome clarity, that this was not going to be a single conversation, not a simple confrontation. This was something that would unfold piece by piece, moment by moment, and he was already in it whether he wanted to be or not. Noah held Lucas's gaze longer than he should have, longer than was safe, because every second stretched the tension tighter, sharper, until it felt like something might snap if neither of them moved. And he hated that he was the one who looked away first, hated that his control slipped even in something as small as eye contact. So he turned slightly, setting the folder down on the desk between them with more force than necessary, the sound cutting through the quiet like a line drawn, something solid, something real. "I did not ask for your help," he said, steady this time. Firmer, because that was easier than admitting that part of him had noticed, had registered every single moment Lucas had stepped in without hesitation, and Lucas did not respond immediately, which somehow made it worse, because the silence gave Noah too much space to think, too much room for memories to creep in uninvited, flashes of a different room, a different time, the echo of laughter that had never been meant to include him, the weight of being seen and dismissed all at once, and he forced himself back to the present, back to this office, this moment, this version of Lucas that did not fit the past no matter how hard Noah tried to make it. "You did not have to," Lucas said finally, voice low, almost measured, and Noah let out a short breath, something close to a bitter laugh, because of course he would say that. Of course he would make it sound simple, like stepping in, like changing everything, was just another decision he could make without consequence. "You always do that," Noah replied before he could stop himself, the words slipping out sharper than intended. "You decide things for other people and act like it is nothing. And the moment the sentence landed, the room shifted again, subtle but undeniable. Because this was no longer just about the present, no longer just about the job or the reassignment or the tension in the office. This was something older, something that had been sitting under the surface waiting for a crack, and Noah felt it, felt the shift in himself as much as in Lucas. Because he had not meant to say that, had not meant to pull the past into this. But now it was there, unavoidable, and Lucas's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough that Noah noticed, because he always noticed. Is that what you think I did? Lucas asked, quieter now, not defensive, not dismissive, just steady. And that steadiness made Noah's chest tighten again. Because it did not match the reaction he expected, it did not match the version of Lucas he knew. And that disconnect made everything feel unstable, uncertain, like he was standing on something that could shift at any moment. I do not think, Noah said, the words coming slower now, heavier. I remember. And there it was, laid out between them. Not clean, not simple, but real. And for a second neither of them spoke, the silence stretching just enough to hold everything unsaid, everything that had been building since the moment Noah walked into that conference room. And then Lucas moved, just slightly, stepping closer to the desk, but not crossing the line Noah had drawn, not closing the space completely, just enough to make his presence felt without forcing it. And that restraint, that small, deliberate distance, hit Noah harder than anything else had so far. Because it meant Lucas was aware of the line, aware of the tension, aware of him, and choosing not to push past it. And that choice unsettled him more than anything else. Then remember this, Lucas said, voice still calm, but carrying something heavier now, something that felt like it had been waiting for the right moment. I am not here to make your life harder. A pause, just enough to let the words settle. I am here to make sure no one else does. And Noah's breath caught again. Quieter this time, less sharp, because the words landed somewhere he did not expect, somewhere he did not have a defense ready for, and he hated that. Hated the way his certainty kept slipping, the way his anger kept losing its edge every time Lucas said something that did not fit the narrative Noah had built. And for a second, just a second, he did not know what to say, did not know how to push back. And that silence felt dangerous, because silence left room for doubt, for questions, for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this than he understood. And Noah did not want that, did not want to reconsider, to reframe, to reopen something he had already closed. But as he stood there, heart still uneven, thoughts still tangled, he realized with a slow, unsettling clarity that this was no longer just about avoiding Lucas. It was about facing something he had never fully understood in the first place. And that realization stayed with him, quiet but persistent, long after the conversation ended, long after he stepped out of the office. Because for the first time since high school, Noah was not just remembering what happened, he was starting to question it. The rest of the day should have felt normal, routine, something Noah could sink into and forget everything that had happened in that office. But it did not, because every small detail felt sharper now. Every glance from coworkers lingered a second too long. Every whisper just slightly quieter when he walked by. And Noah knew that look. He recognized it instantly. The quiet judgment, the subtle distance, the way people started deciding things about you without ever saying them out loud. And it pulled something tight in his chest, something old, something familiar, and he forced himself to focus on his screen, on the numbers, the reports, anything that did not involve looking up, anything that did not involve seeing Lucas across the floor or feeling that steady awareness that he was somewhere nearby. Because that awareness was worse than anything else. It made Noah feel exposed in a way he could not explain, like he was being seen too clearly when all he wanted was to disappear into the background. And he almost managed it, almost convinced himself he could get through the day without another confrontation, without another moment that forced him to question things he did not want to question, until the meeting request came through, sudden, unavoidable, flagged as urgent, and Noah's stomach dropped before he even read the details, because he already knew. He could feel it, the same way you feel a storm before it hits, subtle but certain. And when he opened the message, his name was there again, attached to the same account, the same problem, the same situation that had already started unraveling earlier. And worse, it was scheduled in a room that felt too familiar now, too close to everything he was trying to avoid, and for a second, he just stared at the screen, unmoving, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for him to decide something, to act, to choose, and Noah hated that feeling, hated being forced into situations where there was no clean exit, no easy way out, because every option felt like stepping deeper into something he did not understand. And when he finally stood, when he finally walked toward that room again, it felt heavier than before, not just because of Lucas, but because of everything that was starting to shift around him, everything that no longer felt as simple as it had that morning. And when he pushed the door open, the conversation inside stopped almost immediately, the air shifting, in that subtle way that told him he was already part of the problem, already at the center of something he had not created but would still have to carry. And the eyes that turned toward him were not neutral, not welcoming, just assessing, calculating. And Noah felt it, felt that familiar weight settle in his chest again, the one that told him exactly how this was going to go, exactly how it always went. And he took a breath, slow, controlled, preparing himself for the moment it would tip, for the point where someone would say it out loud, where the blame would land fully on him. And then Lucas spoke before anyone else could, cutting through the tension like it had earlier, but this time it was quieter, more precise. "We are not doing this again." And the room stilled in a different way, less chaotic, more controlled, like the direction had been reset instantly, and Noah's gaze shifted without thinking, landing on Lucas. Because of course it did, because he was the one who kept changing the outcome, the one who kept stepping in before things could spiral, and it made Noah's chest tighten again, not from fear this time, but from something more complicated, something harder to push away, because Lucas was not just protecting him in private moments anymore. He was doing it openly, consistently, without hesitation, and that consistency made it impossible to ignore, impossible to dismiss as coincidence or obligation. And Noah realized, standing there in that room, that this was not going to stop, not the attention, not the protection, not the way Lucas kept placing himself between Noah and everything else. And the thought unsettled him in a way he could not quite explain, because it was not just about what Lucas was doing, it was about why. And the more Noah thought about it, the more that question refused to leave, settling somewhere deep and quiet, waiting for an answer he was not sure he wanted to hear. Noah did not realize how tense he had been until the meeting ended, and the room slowly emptied, voices fading into the hallway, chairs scraping lightly against the floor, the pressure lifting just enough for him to notice the tightness in his shoulders, the shallow way he had been breathing, and he exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself, trying to return to something normal, something predictable. But the problem was that nothing felt predictable anymore, not when Lucas was still there, still standing near the head of the table, not moving, not leaving, just watching in that quiet, deliberate way that made Noah feel like he was the only thing in the room that mattered. And Noah hated that, hated how aware he had become of that gaze, how it followed him even when he tried to ignore it. And he gathered his things quickly, more quickly than necessary. Like movement alone could put distance between them, like leaving first would give him back some control. But just as he turned, Lucas spoke again, not loud, not commanding, just enough to stop him. "You did not answer me." And Noah froze, not completely, not obviously, but enough that it registered, enough that the moment stretched again, pulling him back into something he was trying to leave behind. And he closed his eyes briefly, just a second, before turning halfway, not fully facing Lucas, not giving him everything. "I do not remember asking a question," Noah replied, controlled, careful, but Lucas did not react to the deflection, did not let it pass. "You asked why," he said simply. And that was the problem. Lucas always reduced things down to something direct, something unavoidable, and Noah felt that familiar frustration rise again, sharp, but not as steady as before, because now it was tangled with something else, something quieter, something that made it harder to push back. The way he used to. "I asked a lot of things," Noah said, but even he could hear the shift in his voice, the slight hesitation, the lack of certainty, and Lucas noticed, of course he did, because he always noticed. "Then I will answer the one that matters," Lucas said, and there was a pause, just long enough for Noah's pulse to pick up again. Just long enough for anticipation to settle in before he could stop it. And Noah hated that too. Hated the way his body reacted before his mind could catch up, and slowly, against his better judgment, he turned fully this time, facing Lucas again, because some part of him needed to hear it, needed to understand, even if he did not want to admit that out loud. And Lucas held his gaze without hesitation, steady, unflinching, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. "I am doing this because I did not before," he said, and the words landed quietly, almost softly, but they carried more weight than anything else he had said so far. And Noah felt it, felt the shift immediately, because that was not an excuse, not a justification, not something easy to dismiss. It was an admission, simple and direct, and it cracked something open before Noah could stop it, something he had kept sealed tightly for years, and his breath caught. Just slightly, just enough to matter, because those words pointed back to everything he had been trying not to revisit, everything he had already decided was over, finished, done, and now it felt like it was being pulled back into the present whether he wanted it or not. And Noah shook his head quickly, trying to ground himself again, trying to push back against that pull. "That does not change anything," he said. But the words felt weaker now, less certain, and Lucas did not argue, did not push. Just watched him with that same steady focus. And that was worse, because silence left space for Noah's thoughts to spiral, for doubt to creep in, for the possibility that things were not as simple as he had believed. And Noah stepped back again, needing distance, needing air, because the room suddenly felt too small, too close. "You cannot just decide to fix things now," he added, sharper this time, trying to rebuild the wall that had started to crack. And Lucas's expression shifted just slightly, something almost like understanding passing through it. But he did not step forward, did not close the space, just said quietly, "I am not fixing anything." A pause, measured, deliberate. "I am not letting it happen again." And that stopped Noah completely, because the words were not about the past, not entirely. They were about now, about the present, about something ongoing, something still unfolding. And for the first time, Noah realized that whatever Lucas thought he was protecting him from, it was not over yet. It was still happening, still moving around him in ways he had not fully seen. And that realization settled deep, quiet but heavy, because it meant this was bigger than just them, bigger than just history. And as Noah stood there, heart unsteady, thoughts shifting, he understood that walking away would not make it disappear, because whatever this was, it had already started, and Lucas was not the only one who knew it. Noah did not sleep well that night, not because of anything obvious, not because of noise or light or anything he could point to and fix, but because his mind refused to stay quiet, replaying the same words over and over again. "I am not letting it happen again." And he turned onto his side, then onto his back, staring at the ceiling like it might offer an answer he did not have yet, because the more he thought about it, the less it made sense, not just Lucas's actions, but the implication behind them, the idea that something was still happening, something Noah had not fully seen. And that thought sat heavy in his chest, uncomfortable, persistent, and by the time morning came, he felt more tired than rested, more unsettled than before. And the office did not help, because the moment he walked in, he could feel it again, that subtle shift in the atmosphere, like something had already started before he arrived. Conversations cutting off just a little too quickly, glances that lingered just a second too long. And Noah slowed his steps slightly, his awareness sharpening without him meaning it to, because this felt familiar, too familiar, and his stomach tightened as he reached his desk, setting his bag down carefully, quietly, like sudden movement might draw more attention than he wanted. And he tried to focus, tried to lose himself and work the way he usually did, but it did not last, because a message popped up on his screen, anonymous, no name attached, just a file and a single line of text. "You might want to see what they are saying about you." And Noah's fingers hovered over the mouse for a second, hesitation flickering through him, because he already knew this would not be good. He already knew this would not be something he could ignore. And still, he clicked, because not knowing felt worse, and the file opened slowly, line by line. A thread of messages, internal, private, but clearly not meant for him. Comments about the project, about the mistake, about him. Words that were not outright accusations, but not far from it either. Suggestions, implications, doubts carefully phrased to sound reasonable, while still placing him at the center of everything that had gone wrong. And Noah felt it, that familiar drop in his chest, that quiet, sinking feeling of being pushed into a space he did not choose, of being framed in a way he could not easily escape. And he scrolled, slower now, his jaw tightening slightly, because this was not random. This was not just office gossip. It was organized, deliberate, subtle enough to avoid direct confrontation, but clear enough to shape perception. And Noah leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose, trying to steady himself, trying to think logically, to separate emotion from fact. But it was harder than it should have been, because this was not new. Not really. It was just a different setting, a different version of something he had already lived through. And the realization made his chest tighten again, sharper this time, because maybe Lucas had been right. Maybe it had not stopped. Maybe it had just changed shape. And before Noah could decide what to do, before he could even process fully, a shadow fell across his desk, and he looked up automatically, already knowing who it would be before his eyes confirmed it. Lucas standing there, expression unreadable but focused, like he had already seen something Noah had not yet. Close it. Lucas said quietly, not a command, not harsh, just firm enough to cut through everything else. And Noah hesitated for half a second before doing it. The screen going dark, the messages disappearing, but the feeling remained, heavy and unresolved. And Noah looked up at him again, searching, questioning without words, and Lucas held his gaze, steady as always. This is what I meant, he said, voice low, controlled, and Noah's chest tightened, because now it was real, now it had shape, now it had proof, and whatever this was, whatever was happening around him, it was not in his head. It was not just memory repeating itself. It was happening again, right here, right now. And the worst part was not the messages, not the whispers, not even the implication. It was the fact that Lucas had known before he did, had seen it coming, had been waiting for it. And that meant this was not the beginning. This was something already in motion, something Noah had walked into without realizing. And as he sat there, heart unsteady, thoughts shifting, he understood with quiet clarity that this time, he would not be able to pretend he did not see it, because now, there was no question left about whether it was real. Noah stared at the dark screen for a second longer than necessary, the reflection staring back at him unfamiliar, like he was seeing himself from the outside, caught in something he had not agreed to be part of, and slowly he exhaled, forcing his shoulders to relax even though the tension had already settled deep. And he looked up at Lucas again, searching for something, anything that would make this clearer, easier to understand. But Lucas's expression remained steady, controlled, like he had already processed this, already moved several steps ahead while Noah was still catching up, and that realization hit harder than the messages themselves, because it meant Lucas had been watching this unfold, had seen it forming before Noah even noticed the first crack. How long? Noah asked quietly, the question slipping out before he could filter it, because it mattered, because timing meant intention. And intention meant this was not random, and Lucas did not hesitate, did not deflect. Long enough, he replied, and Noah's jaw tightened slightly at that, because it was not a real answer, not specific, not concrete, just enough to confirm what Noah already feared without giving him something he could hold on to. And Noah leaned back slightly in his chair, the movement small but necessary, creating just a bit of distance, a bit of space to think, because his thoughts were starting to move too fast, connecting things he had not wanted to connect, remembering moments that had felt off, but not important enough to question at the time. The way conversations shifted when he approached, the way certain emails stopped including him without explanation, the way responsibility seemed to land on him just slightly more often than it should. And now, with the messages fresh in his mind, those moments rearranged themselves into something clearer, something intentional, and Noah felt it, that slow, unsettling realization building piece by piece, not sudden, not explosive, just steady and undeniable. And he let out a quiet breath, more controlled this time, because panic would not help, reaction would not help. He had learned that much, and he needed to think, needed to understand before he moved, before he said anything else. Why did you not tell me? He asked, after a moment, and this time his voice was different, less sharp, less defensive, more focused, because this was not about the past anymore, not entirely. This was about now, about something active, something unfolding in real time, and Lucas's gaze shifted slightly, not away, never away. But something in it changed, something more deliberate, more careful, because you would not have believed me, he said, simple, direct. And Noah knew that was true, knew it immediately, because even now, even with proof sitting right in front of him, part of him still resisted, still wanted to dismiss it, to downplay it, to pretend it was not as serious as it looked. And that realization made something twist in his chest again, quieter this time, less sharp but more persistent, because it meant Lucas understood him in a way he did not expect, in a way he was not comfortable with. And Noah looked away briefly, just a second, grounding himself before looking back, because avoiding this would not make it disappear. Not anymore. So what now? He asked, and the question hung there between them, heavier than anything else he had said so far, because it was not just about information, it was about action, about what came next, about whether Noah would step into this or try to step away. And Lucas did not answer immediately, which told Noah more than any quick response could have, because it meant there was already a plan, already a direction, and Lucas was choosing how much to say, how much to reveal. And that control, that quiet authority, should have irritated Noah, should have pushed him further away. But instead it did something else, something more complicated, something that made Noah feel, for just a moment, less alone in this. And that feeling unsettled him more than anything else had so far, because it was unfamiliar, because it was dangerous. And when Lucas finally spoke, his voice was lower, more measured. Now we make sure it stops. And Noah's chest tightened. Again, not from fear this time, but from the weight of that word, we, because it implied something shared, something connected, something Noah had not agreed to but was already part of, and he realized, with a slow, steady clarity, that this was no longer something he could handle alone, not if he wanted to understand it, not if he wanted to stop it. And the thought lingered, quiet but undeniable, because for the first time, the idea of not facing it alone felt less like a weakness and more like a choice. And Noah did not know yet what that meant, but he knew it mattered. The word "we" lingered in Noah's mind long after Lucas walked away, settling into every quiet space between thoughts, reshaping the way he looked at everything around him. Because it was not just a suggestion, not just a temporary alliance. It was something more binding than that, something that implied trust. And trust was the one thing Noah had learned not to give easily, not after everything, not after how quickly it could be broken. And yet here he was, sitting at his desk, staring at numbers that refused to make sense, aware of every movement in the office without meaning to be, noticing patterns he had ignored before, the way certain people avoided direct conversation with him now, the way emails came with just enough information to keep him involved, but not enough to give him control, the way responsibility shifted subtly in his direction whenever something went wrong, and it clicked slowly, not all at once, but piece by piece, like a puzzle forming without asking for permission. And Noah leaned back in his chair slightly, fingers tapping once against the edge of his desk before stilling again, because reacting too quickly would only make things worse. He knew that. He had learned that. And this time he would not let himself be caught off guard. This time he would pay attention. And as the day moved forward, that awareness sharpened, every interaction becoming something to analyze, every word carrying more weight than before. And it was exhausting, but it was also necessary, because for the first time, Noah was not just enduring the situation, he was observing it, and that shift, small but significant, changed everything. And when the next meeting was called, when he walked into that same room again, it felt different, not because the tension was gone, but because he was ready for it now, ready to see it instead of just feeling it. And as the conversation started, as the same careful language circled around the issue, avoiding direct blame while still guiding attention toward him, Noah noticed the details, the phrasing, the way certain names were mentioned while others were left out, the way responsibility was framed just slightly off. And for a moment he said nothing, just listened, just let it unfold the way it always did, until Lucas spoke, not to interrupt, not to shut it down completely, but to redirect it, subtle, precise, asking questions that forced clarity, that pulled vague statements into something concrete, something that could not easily be twisted. And Noah watched that too, watched the way the room shifted under that pressure, the way uncertainty crept in where confidence had been before, and something inside him settled, not completely, not comfortably, but enough to feel the difference. enough to understand what Lucas had meant earlier, because this was not about stepping in once, not about a single moment of protection. This was ongoing, strategic, deliberate, and Noah realized that if he wanted this to stop, truly stop, he could not stay silent. He could not just stand there and let things be decided around him. And the thought was uncomfortable, unfamiliar, because speaking up had never gone well for him before. But this time was different. This time he was not alone in the room, not entirely. And that made a difference whether he wanted it to or not. And slowly, carefully, Noah straightened slightly in his chair, his voice steady when he finally spoke. Not loud, not confrontational, just clear. That is not accurate. And the words landed differently than he expected, not dismissed, not ignored, but considered. And the shift that followed was subtle but real, and Noah felt it, felt the way the dynamic changed even slightly. And when he glanced toward Lucas, just for a second, he caught the smallest change in his expression, not approval exactly, not something obvious, just a quiet acknowledgement. Like this was what he had been waiting for, and Noah looked away quickly, focusing back on the conversation, because that look unsettled him more than anything else, not because it was negative, but because it was not. And as the meeting continued, as the conversation adjusted, as the narrative shifted just enough to open space instead of closing it, Noah understood something he had not fully realized before, that this was not just about being protected, it was about being seen, being given the space to stand on his own without being pushed out of it, and that realization stayed with him long after the meeting ended, quiet but persistent, because it changed the way he looked at Lucas, not completely, not enough to erase the past, but enough to make him question it again, enough to make him wonder if there had always been more to the story than he had allowed himself to see. Noah did not expect the shift to feel this noticeable, but it did, subtle and quiet yet impossible to ignore, like something in the room had tilted just slightly in his favor, not enough to be obvious, not enough to be safe, but enough to make him aware of it. And that awareness stayed with him as the day moved forward, threading through every interaction, every glance, every conversation that paused just a second too long when he stepped closer. And he could feel it now, the way perception worked in spaces like this, the way it could be shaped, redirected, softened, or sharpened depending on who controlled the narrative. And for the first time, Noah was not just reacting to it. He was watching it happen in real time, understanding the structure behind it. And that understanding was both grounding and unsettling, because it meant this had never been random, not then, not now. And his thoughts circled back to Lucas again, to the way he had stepped in, not loudly, not forcefully, but with precision, with timing that suggested he had seen all of this before. And Noah exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair as he stared at his screen without really seeing it, because the question that had been sitting in the back of his mind all day finally surfaced fully, unavoidable now. If Lucas had known, if Lucas had been watching this unfold, then what had he seen back then? And more importantly, what had he not done? And the thought tightened something in Noah's chest, sharper this time, because it pulled the past into the present in a way that felt too close, too immediate. And he pushed himself up from his chair before he could overthink it, before he could talk himself out of it, because some part of him needed clarity, needed an answer, even if it was not the one he wanted. And the walk to Lucas's office felt shorter this time, less hesitant, more deliberate. And when he reached the door, he did not pause, did not second guess. He knocked once and stepped inside without waiting. And Lucas looked up immediately, like he had expected him, like this moment had already been accounted for. And Noah stopped a few feet away, close enough to be heard without raising his voice, far enough to keep the space intact. And for a second, he just stood there, gathering the words, because this was not about work anymore, not really. This was something else, something older, something that had been left unresolved for too long. Did you know? Noah asked finally, the question simple but heavy. And Lucas did not ask what he meant, did not pretend not to understand, just watched him, waiting. And Noah swallowed once, steadying himself. Back then, he added, quieter now, but no less direct. Did you know what was happening? And the room seemed to still around them, the air shifting into something denser, something more fragile. Because this was the question, the one Noah had avoided for years. The one he had answered for himself without ever hearing it from the source. And Lucas's gaze did not waver. but something in it changed, something deeper, something that had not been there before, and for the first time since all of this started, he did not respond immediately, and that hesitation, small as it was, hit Noah harder than any quick answer could have, because it meant this was not simple, not clean, not something that could be dismissed in a single sentence, and Noah felt it, that quiet tension building again, not sharp this time, but heavy, like something important was about to surface, something that would change the way he saw everything. And he held Lucas's gaze, waiting now, not pushing, not retreating, just waiting, because whatever the answer was, he needed to hear it, even if it broke something he had only just started to question. Lucas did not look away, but the silence stretched longer than Noah expected, longer than was comfortable, and that was how Noah knew this mattered, because Lucas was not someone who hesitated without reason, not someone who paused unless the answer required it, and Noah felt it, that quiet tension tightening in his chest again, not sharp, not defensive, just heavy, like he was standing at the edge of something he could not step back from once he heard it. And for a second, he almost spoke again, almost filled the silence just to break it. But he stopped himself, because this time he needed the truth, not a version of it, not something easy to accept, just the truth. And finally Lucas exhaled slowly, the movement subtle but visible, like he was choosing his words carefully instead of avoiding them. And when he spoke, his voice was lower than before, not uncertain, but not as controlled either. Yes, he said, and the word landed immediately. Direct and undeniable, and Noah felt it. That single answer cutting through everything else, sharper than he expected, because it confirmed what he had feared for years, what he had already believed without needing to ask, and his jaw tightened slightly, his fingers curling at his sides before he forced them still again, grounding himself in the present, in this room, because reacting too quickly would only make this worse. You knew. Noah repeated, quieter now, but the words carried weight, because they were not a question anymore, just a fact, and Lucas nodded once, not denying it, not softening it, just acknowledging it, and that honesty, that lack of deflection, should have made it easier, should have made it simpler, but it did not, because it meant there was no misunderstanding to hide behind, no confusion to untangle, just a clear line between what had happened and what Lucas had done, or had not done. And Noah let out a short breath, something between disbelief and something deeper, something harder to name. And you did nothing, he said, and this time there was no hesitation in his voice, no uncertainty, just a steady edge that had been building since the moment he asked the question. And Lucas's gaze shifted slightly at that, not away, never away, but something in it changed, something that looked almost like regret, but not the kind that erased anything, not the kind that made it better, just the kind that acknowledged it had happened. I did not stop it, Lucas said, and the phrasing was careful, deliberate, and Noah caught that immediately, because it was not the same as doing nothing, but it was close enough that the difference felt insignificant, and Noah let out a quiet laugh, humorless, brief, because of course Lucas would choose his words like that, precise, controlled, even now, even here, that sounds the same to me, Noah replied, and for a moment the tension between them sharpened again, not explosive, not loud, just clear, like a line drawn that neither of them could ignore, and Lucas did not argue, did not correct him, just stood there, steady, taking it, and that, more than anything else, made Noah pause, because Lucas was not defending himself, not trying to reframe it, not pushing back the way Noah expected, and that absence of resistance felt unfamiliar, unsettling, like something was missing from the pattern Noah had built in his head, and Lucas spoke again, quieter this time. I thought it would pass, he said, and Noah's chest tightened immediately, because that sentence, simple as it was, carried something else under it, something that felt like explanation but not excuse, and Noah shook his head slightly, the movement small but firm. It did not, he said, and the words landed heavier than he intended, because they were not just about the past anymore, they were about everything that followed, everything that came after, everything Noah had carried with him long after those moments ended. And Lucas's gaze softened just slightly, not enough to change his expression completely, but enough for Noah to notice, because he always noticed. I know, Lucas said, and there was no defense in it, no justification, just acknowledgement. And that made something in Noah's chest shift again, not easing, not resolving, just changing shape, because this was not the confrontation he had imagined, not the argument he had prepared for in his head all these years. This was something quieter, something more complicated. And as he stood there, the past and present overlapping in ways he could not fully separate anymore, Noah realized that the answer he had been waiting for had not closed anything, had not given him the clarity he thought it would. It had only opened something else, something deeper, something that would take more than one conversation to understand. And that realization settled between them, unspoken but undeniable, because this was not over, not yet, not even close. Noah did not leave immediately after that, even though every instinct told him to, because walking away would have been easier, cleaner, something he understood how to do. But instead he stayed where he was, the space between him and Lucas feeling different now, heavier, but not as sharp, like something had shifted just enough to change the way it pressed against him. And he exhaled slowly, trying to sort through the mess of thoughts that refused to settle. Because the answer he had gotten was not what he expected, not entirely. It had confirmed the worst part. Yes, but it had also left something else behind, something unresolved, something that did not fit neatly into the version of the past he had carried for so long. And Noah hated that, hated the way certainty slipped through his fingers the moment he tried to hold on to it. Because certainty had been easier, certainty had been something solid he could build around. And now it felt like it was cracking, like something underneath it was starting to show through whether he wanted it to or not. And he looked at Lucas again, really looked this time, not just at the surface, not just at the controlled expression or the steady posture, but at the small details he had ignored before, the way Lucas's shoulders were not as rigid as they had been earlier, the way his gaze held something quieter now, something less guarded, and Noah's chest tightened slightly at that, because it did not match the version of Lucas he remembered. It did not align with the image he had kept intact for years, and that disconnect made it harder to stay angry the way he had been, harder to hold on to the same level of distance, and that unsettled him more than anything else. Because anger had been simple, anger had been something he knew how to manage, but this uncertainty, this shift, it was unfamiliar, unpredictable, and Noah did not like things he could not control. "You thought it would pass," he said again, quieter this time, not repeating it for Lucas, but for himself, like saying it out loud might make it easier to understand. And Lucas did not interrupt, did not correct him, just let the word settle. And Noah ran a hand lightly over the back of his neck, the movement automatic, grounding, because he needed something physical to hold on to while everything else felt unstable. "That is what you always do," he added after a moment, not accusing this time, not as sharp, just stating it. And Lucas's gaze shifted slightly at that, something flickering there before settling again. "No," he said, and the word was quiet but firm, and Noah's eyes lifted immediately, catching that difference, because it was not denial, not exactly. It was something else, something more deliberate. "That is what I did," Lucas continued, the correction small but important, and Noah felt it, that distinction landing in a way he did not expect, because it separated the past from the present in a way that forced him to see them differently, not as one continuous pattern, but as something that had changed, and he did not know yet what to do with that, did not know how to place it, and the silence that followed stretched again. But this time it was different, less tense, less sharp, more weighted with thought than conflict. And Noah found himself not wanting to break it immediately, not rushing to fill it with something defensive or dismissive, because for the first time, he was not just reacting, he was considering, and that shift, subtle as it was, changed the way the moment felt entirely. And Lucas stepped back slightly then, not retreating, not pulling away completely, just enough to give Noah space again, that same deliberate distance he had maintained before. And Noah noticed that too. Noticed the consistency in it, the way Lucas never pushed past what Noah was willing to give, and that awareness settled somewhere deep, quiet but persistent, because it suggested something Noah had not expected, something he was not ready to fully acknowledge yet. And as he stood there, the conversation still hanging between them, unfinished but no longer as volatile, Noah realized that whatever this was, whatever they were stepping into, it was not going to be resolved in a single moment. Not with one answer, not with one confrontation. It was something that would unfold slowly, piece by piece. And for the first time, he did not immediately reject that idea, did not push it away. He just stood there, letting it exist, letting it take shape, even if he did not fully understand it yet, because some part of him, quiet but undeniable, wanted to see where it led. Noah stepped out of Lucas's office slowly, not because he was unsure of where he was going, but because something in him had shifted in a way that made rushing feel impossible, like moving too fast would break whatever fragile understanding had started to form. And the hallway outside felt quieter than before. The usual office noise dulled just enough to make him aware of his own thoughts again. And this time they were not as sharp, not as defensive, just heavy, layered, like pieces rearranging themselves into something new that he had not agreed to yet, but could no longer ignore. And he walked back to his desk on instinct, movements automatic, familiar, grounding in a way that let him think without feeling completely untethered. And when he sat down, the screen in front of him lit up again. Numbers, reports, the same work he had been doing all along. But it did not feel the same, not after everything that had just happened, because now there was context, now there was awareness, now there was a question that refused to stay quiet. What else had he misunderstood? And Noah leaned back slightly, fingers resting against the edge of the desk as he exhaled slowly. Because this was not just about Lucas anymore, not just about the past or the present, or the way those two things were starting to blur together. It was about him, about the way he had chosen to see things, the way he had held on to certain versions of events because they made sense, because they were easier to carry. And now that clarity was shifting, not disappearing, not rewriting everything, but enough to make him hesitate, enough to make him question, and that hesitation followed him through the rest of the day, through every interaction, every quiet moment where he found himself noticing things he had not paid attention to before. The way Lucas did not hover, but was always close enough to step in when needed. The way conversations that might have turned now redirected before they could. The way the subtle pressure that had been building around him seemed to lose some of its weight. Not gone, not resolved, but interrupted. And Noah could not ignore that anymore. Could not dismiss it as coincidence or obligation, because it was consistent, deliberate, and as the hours passed, that realization settled deeper, quieter, more certain, and by the time the office began to empty, by the time the lights dimmed slightly and the noise faded into something softer, Noah found himself still sitting there, staring at a screen he was no longer really reading, because his thoughts had circled back again, not to anger, not to blame, but to something else, something that felt like the beginning of understanding but not quite there yet. And he closed the file in front of him, the click of it final in a way that felt symbolic, like he was closing one version of things without fully knowing what would replace it. And when he stood, gathering his things slowly, he hesitated for just a moment, a brief pause that would have meant nothing to anyone else, but felt significant to him, because he knew exactly where Lucas's office was, knew he could go back, could ask more questions, could push for answers that would either settle this or break it open further. And the fact that he considered it at all, even for a second, told him everything he needed to know about how much had already changed. And Noah shook his head slightly, not dismissing the thought, but setting it aside for now, because this was not something that would be solved in one night, not something that could be forced into clarity all at once. It would take time. It would take more moments like the ones he had just experienced, more conversations that shifted things piece by piece. And as he walked toward the exit, the quiet of the evening settling around him, he realized that for the first time since all of this started, he was not just trying to protect himself from Lucas. He was trying to understand him, and that difference, small as it seemed, changed everything, because understanding required something he had not been willing to give before: attention, openness, the willingness to see beyond what he already believed. And as he stepped outside, the cool air hitting his face, grounding him in the present, Noah exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest easing just slightly, not gone, not resolved, but different. And somewhere in the back of his mind, quiet but undeniable, a new thought settled in, not fully formed yet, not something he could say out loud, but something that lingered all the same. That maybe, just maybe, the person he had spent years trying to forget was not the same one standing in front of him now. And if that was true, then everything Noah thought he knew might not be as certain as he once believed.